Hij had het over jouw programma.
Wat zei hij over jouw programma? En toen moest je reageren. Hoe deed je dat?
Hij zei, ik ben ontslagen vanwege de kijkcijfers. En ik zei,
Excuse me, sir. If you're going to support Joy Reid, the best way for you to do it was to make sure she didn't suffer a 47% drop in ratings. See, we don't do that enough, and I'm speaking from personal experience, so I'm qualified to talk about this subject. Qualified. StephenASmith wanted to prove he was more than a sports analyst, like he could step into political talk with the heavy hitters. But after this week, he might be wishing he stayed in the ESPN lane, because Joy Reid and Sunny Host didn't just challenge him, they put him on full display. This wasn't a disagreement, this was exposure, and it happened twice in the same week. Led by two of the most respected black women in media, Joy Reid said out loud what a lot of people have been whispering, but were too careful to say. Joy didn't.
Als u Joy Reid wilt steunen, had u er het beste voor kunnen zorgen dat haar kijkcijfers niet met 47% daalden. Kijk, dat doen we niet vaak genoeg. En ik spreek uit persoonlijke ervaring, dus ik ben gekwalificeerd om over dit onderwerp te praten.
Viewers, which is solid, but not pay me like a media empire solid. So if the numbers don't explain the check, what does? According to Joy, it's the lane he's choosing. Over the past year, Stephen A. has gone after Rochelle Obama, Jasmine Crockett, Joy Reid herself, and questioned Kamala Harris's qualifications. They're paying you because you are willing to say the nasty things about black people that they want to say. You're willing to take their denigration of black women in particular and put it in the mouth of a Negro. And because you're willing to put the denigration of black women in particular into a Negro's mouth, you now think that, oh, I must be a freaking political genius. But just be clear, you're not being paid for your numbers. You're being paid for what you're willing to do to us for white people's entertainment. And as long as you cool with that, bro, keep being you. But don't come for my friends. Don't come for people that I know their value and try to devalue them.
Je krijgt $100 miljoen voor een programma met de helft van mijn kijkcijfers, zelfs op mijn slechtst. Ik moest zijn cijfers letterlijk googelen. Ik dacht, hoeveel mensen luisteren er naar dat programma? Zijn het er 4 miljoen? Oh, wacht, het zijn er wat? 500.000. Man, dat is gemiddeld CNN. Dat is niet zoveel. Ze betalen je niet voor je kijkcijfers, vriend. Ze betalen je omdat je bereid bent de nare dingen over zwarte mensen te zeggen die zij willen zeggen. Je bent bereid een denigrerende opmerkingen over zwarte vrouwen in de mond van een zwarte man te leggen. En omdat je bereid bent om juist die denigrerende opmerkingen over zwarte vrouwen in de mond van een zwarte man te leggen, denk je nu dat je wel een politiek genie moet zijn. Maar laat het duidelijk zijn, je wordt niet betaald voor je kijkcijfers. Aanhalingsteken, je wordt betaald voor wat je bereid bent ons aan te doen voor het vermaak van witte mensen. En zolang je daar oké mee bent, ga vooral zo door. Maar val mijn vrienden niet aan. Val mensen niet aan waarvan ik de waarde ken en probeer ze niet te kleineren voor alle zwarte vrouwen die je kunnen zien en horen, want we weten wat je aan het doen bent.
And viewers, which is solid, but not pay me like a media empire solid. So if the numbers don't explain the check, what does? According to Joy, it's the lane he's choosing. Over the past year, Stephen A. has gone after Michelle Obama, Jasmine Crockett, Joy Reid herself, and questioned Kamala Harris's qualifications. They're paying you because you are willing to say the nasty things about black people that they want to say. You're willing to take their denigration of black women in particular and put it in the mouth of a Negro. And every time he leans into those angles, conservative media jumps in. Invites, praise, and non-stop amplification. That's the role Joy Reid says he's playing, and once she said it, you couldn't unsee it. Then came The View, and Sunny Host gave him an exit ramp. She calmly laid out the facts and gave Stephen a multiple chances to admit he was wrong about Senator Mark Kelly. This wasn't an ambush. It was an opportunity to show humility. Instead, Stephen A. doubled down. He got louder, and in that moment, he ended up proving exactly what Joy Reid had already exposed. I listened to ESPN for an hour. It's like watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta, you know? I mean, you know, it's the same drama, and they're yelling at each other, and they don't get along, you know? I mean, StephenASmith, he's just like every other post-Real Housewife. He would be amazing. So that's why I'm like, what's the difference? It's just, you know, it's just sociological drama. Sonny reminded everyone what Stephen A. said about Senator Mark Kelly, a decorated Navy combat pilot, astronaut, and veteran, and pressed him on accusing Kelly of crossing a line for reminding troops that they can refuse to follow illegal.
Lenta kijkt, weet je. Ik bedoel, het is hetzelfde drama en ze schreeuwen tegen elkaar en ze kunnen het niet met elkaar vinden, weet je. Ik bedoel, StephenASmith, hij is net als elke andere voormalige Real Housewife.
Hij zou geweldig zijn.
Dus daarom denk ik, wat is het verschil? Het is gewoon, weet je, het is gewoon sociologisch.
The same man Stephen A. was indirectly defending, reminding everyone that back in 2016, he said there must be consequences for war crimes and that the military does not follow unlawful orders from a commander-in-chief. Sonny looked Stephen A. straight in the face and said, "Given that the secretary himself said this, I'd love to give you the opportunity to perhaps change your position on what you said." That wasn't pressure, that was a gift, a clean exit, a chance to say, "I misunderstood, I was wrong." Stephen A. refused. His response was blunt and loud. "I'm not changing a thing, I didn't stutter once." Sonny pushed back, saying he was staying loud and wrong, and Stephen A. snapped back. "You can call it loud and wrong all you want. You're entitled to your opinion, I'm entitled to mine." But here's the problem. It wasn't an opinion, it was a fact. And Stephen A. flat out refused to accept it.
Krijgt $100 miljoen voor een programma met de helft van mijn kijkcijfers op mijn slechtst. Ik moest zijn cijfers letterlijk googelen. Ik dacht, hoeveel mensen luisteren er naar het programma? Zijn het er 4 miljoen? Oh, wacht, het zijn er wat? 500.000, man. Dat is gemiddeld CNN. Dat is niet...
Right there. The irony was wild. StephenASmith, a sports commentator, podcast host, and TV personality, was dismissing military law explained by a defense secretary because he used to be on TV. This is the same Stephen A. who has zero military experience, zero political science background, and zero foreign policy training. The same Stephen A. who just proved on national television that he doesn't understand basic military code of conduct. And yet, he felt qualified to lecture a veteran senator about military protocol. The lack of self-awareness was unreal. And here's where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. This wasn't the first time a prominent black woman had to publicly correct Stephen Smith. Sonny Honst had to explain military law. Carrie Champion has checked him before over his comments about black women in media. Every time it happens, the response is the same. Stephen A. gets defensive, he gets louder, he doubles down instead of listening. That's not confidence, that's ego. And that ego is why he won't admit he's wrong. His political brand is built on being the guy who never backs down, the so-called truth teller who stands firm no matter what. But that image collapses the moment facts don't line up. When you refuse to adjust after being corrected, you're not principled, you're just stuck. Instead of showing growth or humility, Stephen A. attacks credentials, raises his voice, and digs in deeper. And every time he does it, his credibility outside of sports takes another hit. Stephen A. keeps brushing off facts like they're opinions. He finds a couple senators who sort of agree with him and uses that as cover to ignore everyone else. That's not confidence, that's insecurity dressed up as strength. And this takes us right back to what Joy Reid said, because this is the core of the whole situation. Joy accused Stephen A. of being willing to put down black people, especially black women, for white approval and entertainment. That's not a light accusation. That's saying you're trading integrity for a check. And the uncomfortable truth is the pattern backs it up. Look at Stephen A.'s political run over the past year. He's gone after Michelle Obama, he's questioned Kamala Harris, he's attacked Joy Reid, and every time he leans into those angles, conservative media rewards him. They book him, they praise him, they push him as the reasonable black voice willing to criticize his own community. That's not organic, that's a role. And Joy Reid's point was simple. Stephen A. is playing that role because it pays, not because he's done the work, not because he's deeply informed, but because there's a market for it. And that market is willing to cut a $100 million check. But here's what Stephen A. doesn't seem to realize. Chasing political relevance is costing him the one thing that made him powerful in the first place: credibility. In sports, people respected Stephen A. because he studied the game, he had sources, he knew what he was talking about. In politics, he's showing the opposite. He doesn't understand basic military law, he doesn't fact-check, and when he's corrected with receipts, he doesn't learn, he gets louder. That's not building a brand, that's burning one. And the attention he's getting now isn't respect, it's spectacle. Conservative media isn't inviting him on because he's insightful. They're inviting him on because watching him struggle through political topics is entertaining. He's becoming a character, not a commentator. Now, compare that to what real leadership looks like. When Admiral Alvin Halsey believed an order was unlawful, he didn't defend it on TV, he didn't yell, he resigned. He walked away from decades of service rather than compromise his principles. That's integrity. Stephen A., when proven wrong on national television, attacks credentials, dismisses facts, and cherry-picks agreement. That's not leadership. That's ego protection. Real leaders admit mistakes. Real leaders learn. Real leaders show humility. Stephen A. is doing the opposite, and it's costing him. Let's be clear, StephenASmith made a calculated move into political commentary. He saw an opening, he saw a market, and he decided being louder mattered more than being right. Joy Reid exposed why the money doesn't match the numbers. Sunny Host exposed that he doesn't fully understand the issues he's speaking on. Together, they showed this isn't growth, it's a gamble. And right now, that gamble isn't paying off. Stephen A. is risking his credibility, his standing, and his integrity just to be taken seriously in a space he hasn't prepared for. And the world is watching that fall happen in real time. If you think Joy Reid exposed the real reason Stephen A. keeps embarrassing himself in political debates, hit that like button. If you think Stephen A. needs to admit he was wrong and show some humility, drop a comment below. And if you want more real breakdowns on media, sports, and power plays, make sure you subscribe, because we're just getting started. And this is where the conversation gets even more uncomfortable. Because once you strip away the noise, the outrage, and the viral clips, what's left is a much bigger question. Why does this keep happening? And why does it keep working? StephenASmith isn't the first media personality to believe that confidence alone can replace expertise, but he may be one of the clearest modern examples of what happens when a brand built on dominance enters a space where dominance doesn't equal credibility. In sports, loud confidence is rewarded. In politics, it gets exposed. Stephen A.'s rise came from mastering a very specific lane. He understood athletes, locker rooms, front offices, and media leverage. He built relationships, cultivated sources, and knew how to turn sports debates into must-watch television. That's a skill. No one can take that away from him. But political analysis isn't sports debate. You can't hot take your way through military law, constitutional authority, or foreign policy. And the moment Stephen A. tried, the cracks started to show. What Joy Reid and Sunny Hostin both exposed, intentionally or not, wasn't just Stephen A.'s lack of preparation. They exposed a system that rewards the performance of certainty over the practice of understanding. Stephen A. doesn't study politics the way he studied sports. He reacts, he improvises, he relies on instinct. And when instinct fails, he raises his voice instead of reassessing his position. That's not confidence, that's panic disguised as authority. And here's the part people don't want to admit. The reason Stephen A. keeps getting booked isn't because he's right, it's because he's predictable. He will always take the contrarian angle. He will always escalate instead of reflect. And most importantly, he will never admit fault on air. That makes him useful. Political media doesn't thrive on resolution, it thrives on friction. Stephen A. provides friction without nuance, and that makes him valuable to networks that care more about engagement than education. The louder the disagreement, the higher the rating spike. The more controversial the statement, the longer the clip circulates. Stephen A. has become content, not commentary. And that's exactly what Joy Reid was pointing to when she said the money doesn't match the numbers. Because in traditional media economics, a $100 million deal signals massive influence, but Stephen A.'s political audience doesn't reflect that level of reach. What it reflects is utility. He's not being paid for how many people watch. He's being paid for who watches and how his presence serves a larger narrative. That narrative is simple: legitimacy through contrast. Stephen A. is positioned as the Black voice willing to criticize Black leaders, Black women, and Black political figures in ways that align comfortably with conservative talking points. He becomes the shield, the quote machine, the clip that says, "See, even he agrees." That's why his political takes travel farther than his actual audience size. They're amplified strategically. And here's where the irony deepens. Stephen A. believes he's transcending sports media. He believes he's evolving into a broader intellectual figure, but in reality, he's being reduced, flattened into a role that requires less thought, not more. The system doesn't want him to grow, it wants him to perform. That's why humility is a threat. The moment Stephen A. admits he's wrong, the performance collapses. The moment he says, "I misunderstood military law," the character loses its edge. And the entire political persona he's built, unshakable, dominant, confrontational, falls apart. So instead of learning, he doubles down. Instead of listening, he shouts. Instead of adjusting, he attacks credentials. That's what happened with Sunny Hostin.
She didn't corner him. She didn't mock him. She didn't dismiss him. She gave him facts, legal grounding, and even an off-ramp. And Stephen A. rejected all of it because accepting correction would mean acknowledging limits. And limits are unacceptable in a brand built on absolutism. But absolutism is fragile. The louder Stephen A. becomes in political spaces, the more obvious it is that he hasn't done the foundational work. He confuses opinion with analysis. He treats military law like sports commentary, something you can debate based on vibe and conviction. And when experts correct him, he interprets it as disrespect rather than education. That's ego speaking. And ego is dangerous in political discourse because it resists accountability. It turns every correction into a challenge and every disagreement into a threat. That's why Stephen A. doesn't evolve across appearances. He repeats the same talking points, escalates the same arguments, and refuses the same facts. He's not refining his views, he's defending his image. And this is where credibility dies. In sports, being wrong doesn't end your career. Hot takes are expected, missed predictions are part of the game. But in politics, being wrong, especially about matters of law, military conduct, and constitutional authority, has consequences. When you dismiss facts publicly, you don't just look uninformed, you look reckless. And audiences notice. That's why the reaction to Stephen A.'s political appearances has shifted. At first, it was curiosity. Then it was controversy. Now it's skepticism. People aren't tuning in to learn what he thinks. They're tuning in to see what he'll get wrong next. That's not influence. That's spectacle. Joy Reid understood this immediately. Her response wasn't emotional, it was analytical. She didn't insult Stephen A., she contextualized him. She explained the ecosystem he's operating in and the incentives driving his behavior. And that's why her critique landed so hard, because it wasn't about personality, it was about power. Who gets paid, who gets amplified, and who gets sacrificed. Stephen A. believes he's punching up, challenging elites, questioning authority, disrupting narratives, but in reality, he's punching sideways at people with less institutional protection while aligning himself with systems that benefit from his defiance. That's why the criticism keeps coming from Black women in media. They see the pattern because they've lived it. Joy Reid, Sunny Hostin, Carrie Champion. Different contexts, same dynamic. Each time, Stephen A. is corrected. Each time, he resists. Each time, he escalates. Each time, the correction is framed as an attack. That's not coincidence, that's conditioning. And the conditioning says this: never concede, never soften, never say, "I was wrong." Because once you do, the brand weakens, the persona fractures, the market value drops. But here's the paradox Stephen A. hasn't grasped yet. In politics, credibility grows through correction. The most respected voices aren't the loudest. They're the ones who evolve. They listen, they revise, they learn. And that's why Stephen A.'s transition into political commentary feels hollow. He's brought the wrong tools into the wrong arena, and the audience knows it. That's why clips of him getting fact-checked go viral, not because people hate him, but because people expect more from someone with his platform. They expect preparation, they expect humility, they expect growth. Instead, they get defensiveness, and defensiveness always reveals insecurity. Stephen A.'s insecurity isn't about being wrong, it's about losing control of the room. In sports debates, he controls the tempo. In political discussions, he doesn't. And that loss of control is what triggers the volume, the interruptions, the dismissals. He's trying to reassert dominance in a space where dominance doesn't equal authority. That's why his political pivot feels forced. And that's why Joy Reid's analysis cuts so deep. Because she didn't just criticize what he said, she questioned why he said it. She challenged the incentives behind his voice. She exposed the transactional nature of his positioning. And once that door opens, you can't close it. Now, every appearance gets recontextualized, every critique gets examined, every talking point gets traced back to who benefits. And that's dangerous for someone whose brand depends on unquestioned confidence. StephenASmith made a choice. He chose expansion over expertise, visibility over understanding, volume over accuracy. And right now, that choice is costing him the respect he spent decades building. The saddest part is that it didn't have to go this way. He could have entered political commentary with humility. He could have positioned himself as a learner, not a lecturer. He could have collaborated with experts instead of challenging them. He could have said, "This isn't my field, but I'm listening." That would have strengthened his brand. Instead, he chose confrontation, and confrontation without foundation always collapses. So when people ask whether Stephen A. Smith is being unfairly attacked, the answer is no. He's being evaluated by peers, by experts, by audiences who expect responsibility from someone wielding that much influence. And the evaluation isn't looking good. Joy Reid didn't end Stephen A.'s political ambitions. Sunny Hostin didn't humiliate him. Stephen A. did that himself by refusing to grow. And until he understands that being loud doesn't make you right and being confident doesn't make you informed, this pattern will continue. More confrontations, more fact checks, more viral moments that erode credibility instead of building it. Because politics isn't sports, and ego isn't expertise. If you think Stephen A.'s political pivot is hurting his legacy, hit that like button. If you think accountability matters more than volume, drop your thoughts below. And if you want more real breakdowns that cut through the noise and expose how power actually works in media, make sure you subscribe, because this conversation isn't over.